You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome back to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 178. My name is Clark from 5cardguys.com, and you can also find my Instagram at 5cardguys. With me, as usual, is Hyung of Integrity Sports Cards. John's away this week, but he should be back for our next episode. All right, off the top, I want to talk about the third highest public sale of a sports card, which is, of course, the 1914 Baltimore News pre-rookie card of Babe Ruth, and I believe it was graded an SGC3. Okay, and it sold for, this is crazy, $7.2 million.
Wow.
So, yeah, just want to get your thoughts of what you think of this sale. And I know there was someone was asking Rick Probstein if he bought it, and he said he did not. So we still don't know who the $7.2 million buyer is, but yeah, big sale.
Do you know any previous sales on this card, or no previous history? I'm assuming that a SGC3 has to be one of the higher graded out there.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
It looked rough though. It looked rough.
It's pretty. I mean, it is 100 plus years old, so it's kind of expected. But they ain't getting no PSA 10s on that. But it's a healthy sale regardless. I think. It being the third highest sale of all time of any sports cards. Yeah, and it was a matter of time before a Ruth card, was going to reach that level, because you have, and maybe this is a good point, is, cards necessarily don't have direct correlation to being the best, for instance. Like if you think Mickey Mantle is the most... I guess the highest card sale ever, but I wouldn't categorize Mickey Mantle as the best ever.
Player.
Do you know what I mean? Player. But the card becomes iconic. The demand becomes iconic. So, sometimes we use that as, hobby logic as well. So this is a good example of, someone like Babe Ruth, who is now in the big era of these card sales. So, yeah.
He's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of sports card sales now.
Yes.
At this point. Well, I remember I was talking about the first, I guess it's the Mickey Mantle, the number one sale was 12.6, I believe, but we're talking about what the next 8-figure card would be. Right. And if this was sold 2-3 years ago, it definitely would have pushed 10 million. So, I mean, and at the same time though, like people who play in this market, it doesn't matter what the economy is like, right?
Right. And I think it's also notable that this is long-term investments. Like this is where portfolio type cards are, being built, and sometimes we commingle this type of hobby. I wouldn't even call it a part of the hobby, right? It's at that point you're an art collector, and yeah, and we sometimes kind of mingle the modern day of the way cards go with this is one in the same, playing at this level, right? So this is the way I view card investment. You know what I mean? As opposed to attaining a short flip, because the volatile markets within kind of like the whole investment strategy of sports collecting, essentially.
I get it. Yeah. Good point. But if I'm going to bring it back to the hobby a little bit, this is considered, some people say it's a pre-rookie card. Obviously, his rookie card, diehards will say it was for the Boston Red Sox. The Baltimore News obviously pre-existed. And so would you think that this would maintain or sustain its value because it is a pre-rookie card? Is it not the equivalent of today's, Topps Heritage Minor League cards? Do you know what I mean? Where the Topps Heritage rookie card is far more valuable.
Right. I think vintage didn't have parallels though. You know what I mean? So it went on sheer rarity and collectability, I guess. You know, And now we're just 100 years later facing that kind of like what that was worth, because not many people, held it for that long, or it may be in the trash in the, 20 years later or whatever it may be. So yeah, it's, I think it's just different, it's
Fair.
just different. Yeah.
Fair enough. But regardless, very healthy sale. $7.2 million is a lot of money. And whenever this comes up in terms of high-end sales, it definitely makes news.
Let me ask you a question, Clark. If you had unlimited budget, like you didn't have a budget, like this was more of an art, would you be in this game of like collectibles?
I think so.
Yeah, right? Like you see it as a valid investment.
Yeah, it's cool to have. And like you said, I definitely see it more as art work,
I agree.
as an investment piece that, like I wouldn't be surprised if 10, 20 years down the road it's at Sotheby auctions going for 15, 20 million. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things I would not be surprised. But good question. All right, let's move on to hobby headlines. Okay, so I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast, as I usually do for my regular sports podcast content, and I was pleasantly surprised to hear Michael Rubin, who of course is the CEO of Fanatics, on the show. And he talked about a bunch of things, including almost 16 minutes just focused on the sports card industry. And I thought he said some pretty insightful things. And, as a market leader in the hobby, whether you like it or not, what Fanatics says will have some impact on the overall state of the hobby. So what I thought we could do, just like we did earlier this year when Michael Rubin talked about the hobby in an article, we could discuss some of the key points he mentioned during this recent podcast. And we could talk about whether we agree with some of his points or disagree, or just want to add our initial thoughts on what he thinks about where the hobby is right now. All right. So I pulled 8 interesting quotes from Rubin. Let's see if we could get through them all. And then, just kind of see what we think about it. Okay. Number 1, he says, quote, "I've never seen an industry with more passionate collectors that have been so underserved than this business. And to me, that just creates so much opportunity." End quote. And he goes on to say Fanatics only bought Topps in January of 2022, which is crazy, right? But he adds, while he thinks they've done a lot so far, he also thinks they haven't even got started yet. So what are your thoughts?
I think, man, see, I side with Michael Rubin in a lot of things because I believe in his vision as a visionary. And a lot of people, I guess, will disagree because they're the ones witnessing or being a part of kind of like the outcome of what he's doing. So they don't necessarily see it in the larger scale that he sees all these moves. And he's absolutely right. I think we have been underserved. Like if you talk about the potential of what, it could be, that's what he's looking at. But then our lens, when we look in the micro lens, it's all about how the hobby is going right now, and all the lows and highs, I guess, within that is our reality within the hobby. We're not looking at it from a CEO perspective. So yeah, I agree because I'm more in the boat of visionary, long-term. Where is he going? What is he doing to kind of implement that? Yeah.
No, I agree as well. I feel like most collectors would agree with this because, it's been the same for so long. And we've almost taken it for granted that this is the way it's going to be until you start to see some changes and you're like, oh, wow, this is what it could be now.
But based on comments, I think there's a lot of haters. There's definitely a fair share of haters out there.
Fair enough. But I've been in the news business as a former journalist. I wonder if, the criticism and the critiques are just usually louder than the ones who are cool with it. It's usually the case.
It could be,
right?
yeah.
I'm not saying there's no criticism out there. There certainly is. But yeah, I wonder if their voices are just louder. All right. Next quote. "When we looked at the business, we saw a business where you had sports properties and players giving their rights to Topps, Panini, Upper Deck. These companies were all selling cards to distributors who then picked where the cards go, and they weren't selling to hobby shops. They weren't serving the breakers. They weren't serving the retailers directly. It made no sense. Like, would Nike ever sell to a distributor to sell to Foot Locker or to sell to Foot Action? End quote.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, with the rise of e-commerce, like I said, you see it in other industries, and the rise of digital marketing in general. It's not saying like you cut out distributors in between. It's just saying business models have changed, and those that don't adapt get crushed, right? It's been proven in different marketplaces. So for me, it makes sense that he's not going to use a 20, 30-year-old business model in his strategies. Why would he? He has different resources that he's able to kind of implement, right? So yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
Straightforward. Yeah. And on top of that, there are different players in the industry now. Like he mentioned breakers. Breakers wasn't a huge thing, when we were collecting as kids. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so now you got to service them, and the old business model, as you would say, doesn't really work well for newer players in the game. And then the industry is going to continue to evolve, and I think you got to be able to pivot. You got to adjust, like you're also saying. And I think Fanatics seems to be in a position to be able to do that quickly, and because they were also known as a kind of a digital marketplace for apparel and things like that, so they also have the expertise and the experience.
For sure.
Good for them. Quote number 3. He says, we need to collapse that, like the whole business side of things, how it was kind of all separated, and service the hobby shops directly, the breakers directly, the retailers directly. I think when we bought Topps, they serviced 300 hobby shops, and I think today we service 800 hobby shops or something like that. They want to get product directly from us because they need that direct relationship so they can get the allocation of what they need to build their business to best support their collectors, and we rather give them the margin, end quote. So do you think the hobby shops are better positioned in terms of their business working with Fanatics directly than the distributors they might have had a relationship with for years?
100%. I think that's where the profit needs to go, are the people, and it's direct to from the supplier, right? And it's a relationship that I know Fanatics wants to invest in. And think about distribution, what distribution means. It's at the end of the day, it's whether it's hobby shops, whether it's breakers, they're distributing the product to the end consumer in variable forms of business, right? So for me, yeah, it totally makes sense. Like it goes back to kind of like that point number 2 of the whole business model. It's like then this encourages now distributors, or the so-called distributors, to pivot their strategies to be a part of this whole equation, because if Fanatics is able to, grow the whole marketplace as a whole, that means there's just more opportunity out there for, maybe it's different and not the way that the old school had. And I think that's half the battle, is a lot of people are holding on to old ways of doing things and expecting different results, which isn't going to happen. And realistically, the only way new changes can be made is through, literally shaking the foundation and structure of the business model in order for now you, or Michael Rubin in this case, to use his resources and tools to, pull off his grand master plan that he's doing, which is, I think, is genius, to be honest.
Yeah. And, like the old distribution model really benefited a few, right? Like the ones that have gotten the allocations all the time. And I think, those are the card stores or the hobby shops that have benefited for so long. They're the ones that need to really adjust. And, like you were mentioning that as we hope more hobby shops open up, Fanatics, it's in their best interest to know where everything goes instead of relying on third-party distributors. So
right, for sure.
Makes sense to me as well. Okay, number 4, this is a big one. He says, everyone kept saying to me, Michael, you need to get rid of redemptions. And so it took me a couple of weeks to figure out what a redemption is, which is basically an IOU. there are so many redemptions out there that collectors were like maddened by this. So I went to, baseball, which is our biggest business today. And I went to the head of the union, Tony Clark. And, I went to our organization and said, we need to eliminate redemptions. And they're like, okay, explain to me how this works. What do you need to do? You need to have a much better relationship with athletes. To give you an example, when we launched Topps, Chrome, this is a rough number, but a year ago, we probably had 30,000 redemptions. This year, we have less than 1,000. We reduced it by 97%. That means when you buy cards today, you're not chasing us for cards, end quote.
I love it. I love it because he's thinking like a CEO. He's thinking how a visionary thinks. And people are going to give him crap for not knowing what a redemption is. But that's fine. It's like you don't have to be good within the marketplace. You just have to understand the processes in order to manage it so that you could create the solutions to the problems that, that the industry is having. And that's what he's doing. He goes direct to the source, basically finds out how this whole redemption process works so that he could now implement and listen to the ideas that we've been complaining about and implement it into his own business. And he does it really quick because he's a visionary and a business person. So it's like, you just look for the fastest and most efficient and sustainable solution, right? And once that's done, you're moving on to the next, right? And then as you do that every single day, you're going to grow a brand that, ultimately fixes all its, holes.
Yep. Well, in fear of sounding like fanatic fanboys, I also love it. But I guess a follow-up question is, are you surprised at how fast he dropped the number of redemptions? You know what I mean? Like 97% obviously is very significant, but going from 30,000 to less than 1,000, if those numbers are right.
Right. I think that just proves,
possible?
Yeah, 100%. I just think that proves the lack of responsibility on Topps' end and the way they managed it. And when, like I said, going back to if that was my company, I would have 100% done the same thing because it's costing me money. It's costing me customers. So it's like the faster I could correct that problem. And he probably looked at it and laughed. And this is why he has those comments such as we've been under-serviced as a whole industry, is because he has a first perspective view on it, and he's just addressing the issues that him as a strategist and a problem solver, takes, right? So,
yeah, and you know what also helps? He seems to have good relationships with just athletes, owners. Like he's in that space, and he mentioned in that quote that a big part of eliminating those redemptions is to have those better relationships with athletes so that
I agree with that too. Yeah,
sign faster, sign more.
This is why he's partying with all these athletes, huh?
The white party, the famous white party where every superstar in not just sports but in music and film,
massive Fanatics write-off bill.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. I like this one too. Quote 5. I'll just give you an example of how entrepreneurial we were. Mike Mahan, who's the CEO of our collectibles business, he called me last December. He said, "Hey, I've got a great idea. Every time a baseball player takes the field for the first time, I want to put a debut patch for one game on their jersey. When they get off the field, I want to take that debut patch off and put it into a one-of-one card." I said, "Wow, that's an amazing idea. So what are we doing?" He said, "Well, I spoke to the Topps organization and they told me it will never, ever happen. There's no possibility." You think that the league's going to be okay with that? The player's going to be okay with that? But it makes complete sense. So I called Rob Manfred. I called Tony Clark that minute. I called Tony. I said, "Tony, I got a great idea. I want to put a debut patch on the jersey for the first time. A player plays their major league game." He said, "That sounds like an amazing idea. You make the jerseys, go do it." And then I called Rob. Rob said the same thing. We launched that 4 months later.
Honestly, I'm telling you, I haven't heard these questions or anything. I haven't even read the article, to be honest, or the podcast. But
yeah,
how could you not like this guy? This guy just gets the job done. It's simple as. But think of what he's built in the past. He's built a multi-billion-dollar apparel line. right? So it's like having that leverage. He's able to leverage basically what he's built with new deals, right? And this is what, you have to be excited for someone like that has the connections, that understands macro thinking business, right? And literally solving the issues within that. And people don't see it. That's why it's like, and I don't blame him, because when we're just kind of focused on the micro lens of the hobby, we don't get to actually, because I wouldn't have dissected this, looked into this if you hadn't brought it up, because it's not something that I would like look into or even criticize, right? But like based on the points you're making, it's like this guy's our hero that we needed someone like this to address these issues and make it better. Of course, that's a great idea. It's like the Tops was saying they couldn't do it. He did it in one phone call. Like,
right. Yeah. You know what? This just goes to, prove something that I've already known. Like a lot of these legacy companies, a lot of these companies that have just an old school mentality, it's always no, we can't do it. It's always this automatic assumption. So that's why sometimes it's good to have new people come into the space. Newer people tend to have more ambition, and that's what we're seeing here. So I love it. There's like the positive benefits to that is, for us as content creators, how many episodes do we devote to talking about the MLB debut patch, right? And then, even as the hobby in general, like in terms of bringing money in, he mentioned on a side note, he asked Bill, like, could you imagine if like Shohei had a MLB debut patch 1 of 1? He's like, that would be worth millions right now. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's just millions of dollars coming into the hobby as well. Right. Just like a business mindset that I love about what Michael Rubin is doing right now. Okay, 3 more. 6. There were so many problems just in the manufacturing. We bought the biggest printer of trading cards because there were so many problems. You were having misprinting of cards, delays. Like, you should launch trading cards like you launch a video game launch or a shoe launch. Okay, so Nike says this Travis Scott shoe or this Jordan is launching on this day, and that's an event. When we launch cards today, we have a giant launch coming up on 12/12 with Bowman Chrome and what's going to be Brady Day for us, and it's going to be insane. You'll see all of this. He's talking to Bill Simmons. You're going to actually text me on 12/12 and say, wow, that was awesome. Okay, because we take our launch and we turn them into events.
Can't complain. I cannot complain at all. Now he's using the digital marketing to basically gather enormous amounts of hype and eyes on the product itself. So that's what he's doing. It's like, why on these launches, instead of go to your local store and just buy, right? It's like, no, there's this huge event that he's able to get hundreds of millions of views on. Mm-hmm. And to me, that would be a very successful launch, because if you have that many views on your product, it's going to convert. And especially if the stock is limited. And in this case, it's limited, right? Because the inventory ends when it's sold out. And I guarantee you, at least from their, supply, if they sell direct or however they sell it, they're going to be gone within the day probably, right? And that's just the way digital marketing works. And they're implementing now that side of things. So how could you complain about that?
And you're already seeing it, right? Like each new product over the last few months, there was always something great about it, like in terms of what people can expect and people can anticipate, like the MLB debut patch for Topps Chrome Update. We never had that before. We're, in previous years, like, maybe we'll go rookie card chasing, but I'm sure how many products did they sell just because people were chasing the MLB debut patch? Topps Definitive, the Babe Ruth Shohei, dual auto, 1 of 1s. Amazing. Like, it just creates, just excitement for each product that they're launching. And like he says, it has become an event. It's like, what Steve Jobs did with iPhones and, just launching his Apple products. And I think that's what gets not just the hobby excited, but, it could turn heads from people outside the hobby. They're like, oh, what's going on? What's this, what's the hoopla in the sports card space? So
I think someone like Michael Rubin can implement more utility within the collectibles because of his multitudes of leverage that he's built on his other platforms. Like, this guy's into sports betting. This guy's into all these apparel. Like, we're talking multi-billion-dollar, industries, and he's able to leverage the 2 or leverage the 3 or whatever, however many arms they have of Fanatics. So I think the whole I guess experience, like stuff like the MLB Debut Patch, it's like once they really figure it out, I think it's gonna create a bigger demand for the hobby in general, because now I think everybody's starting to see, hey, ripping definitely is not worth it. Yes, you can get lucky, but I think everybody in this whole hobby understands they're gonna lose 95% of the time, right? Of course you're gonna hit in a break and stuff. That's no different than gambling at this point, right? So it's a way that I would say that's kind of an issue. Then, you're going to have people leaving the hobby just as fast as they came in because they start losing money. They see that it's a pretty bad habit. It's like, how can you leverage it where the loss isn't as hefty on the end user, and, having utility in, let's just say, in sports cards now. There's other ways to make your money back, or at least win something of value, where he could leverage maybe potentially his marketing ability in a different part of his organization, like apparel or e-commerce, into that. Sure. You know what I mean? So.
And even not within other parts of his organization, but he did talk about, and I didn't bring this up, but he did talk about the MVP buyback program.
Oh yeah.
That's creating value for base cards that are normally worth 50 cents.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of that. Yeah.
We love the buyback. Yeah, for sure. And I think the 12-12 event he was alluding to, I believe that's where Tom Brady signs his Montreal Expos cards. And I believe he only signed like 81 of them. So that's going to be a huge deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
We might have to rip a box and
absolutely
film it and put it up on our YouTube page. All right, last 2. This one's a short one. He says, I told you a little bit ago, we're going to put a chip in all high-end cards going forward with a unique identifier. So you can't counterfeit a card, so you can't steal cards. There's so many things we can do to improve the hobby. So he gave that as one example.
Right. Yeah, I mean, anything to do with that, I think it's going to raise eyebrows for sure. But I don't dislike implementing technology to make it safer and better. I know, NFTs are a bad word these days, and but I also think there's massive opportunity in the future with sports cards and NFTs. Still, he still have not kind of dipped into kind of like that level of, I call it technology more so than just the trend. It's like you're implementing technology and what it's served for, or what it was created for, and implemented in places like sports cards, because counterfeiting is an issue. Transferring money even is an issue. It's like, how do you now implement these things where if you're able to you use technology to solve those issues, then yeah, I'm all for it if it betters the hobby for sure.
Yeah, and with all things technology, things will always improve too, right? The first first thing you try with technology might not be the best solution, but you can always improve on it. So I agree with you there. All right, last one. He says, breaking is a big part of the collectibles industry. So what we did, people always question the integrity of what we do. So this year, for the first time, we said, hey, let's take our auditor. I think we hired Deloitte and Touche. We're going to pay you to audit all the results the same way the NBA audits their draft lottery. And we did that this year. We now have Deloitte and Touche coming in this year, auditing everything to make sure that everything is random as it's advertised.
I think, I mean, that's kind of like, okay, like great, I guess. Like,
no-brainer.
No brainer. It's like, I think that could even stay internal. Like it doesn't even need to be a headline news or a sell feature. Because I think there's a lot of like, people will take that. I don't know how you could take that in a negative spin, but there obviously can be. And yeah, I just think that it's too much information, but great. Like, you know what I mean?
To be fair, in the podcast, and I took it out of context, but I thought it was cool to know, as a hobbyist. But he says we don't advertise this, but we know
really?
that. Yeah,
Okay.
but I guess Bill Simmons asked a question like, there's people that say there's shady business going on in the breaking industry.
Right. Okay.
Are these hot boxes?
I see that context now. Okay.
Yes, that's the context. I should have clarified.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Okay.
you responded in kind. Yeah.
Yeah. Like perfect. Then that just proves it, right? Like that. Yeah. It's just too much information. But if he needs an answer for that, yeah, absolutely. Then that's the safest way to shut everybody down. It's like, here's proof. This is fact. And if you have any questions, here it is. And yeah.
There you go. All right, exciting stuff.
It was cool.
Always good to get updates like this from Rubin and what Fanatics is doing. And if you haven't heard the podcast, we wrapped it up for you in a nutshell. And if you want to get things more in context, then just listen to, I think it's 3 episodes ago from today's date, December 7th. Okay, let's go on to our next segment we're calling Hobby Impact. So, as of this recording, which is Thursday afternoon, us Toronto Blue Jays fans, well, really all baseball fans in all of Canada, are anxiously awaiting any news of Shohei Ohtani's decision as to where he will sign next. Most reports, put the Dodgers and the Blue Jays as the favorites. So by the time the show airs, we'll hopefully know where he goes. But for this segment, let's play out both scenarios and then talk about what kind of impact it'll have on his card values, if any. Okay, and we'll also go over other recent free agent news and signings as well. Okay, but first, Shohei. We talked about this briefly on a previous pod, but now that it's come down to 2, really. Let's say as an investor, which team do you want him to sign with, or does it matter whether he goes to the Dodgers or the Jays?
I'm going with I'm actually going with the Jays. Well, not only because it's like I want it to happen.
Right.
Well, first, let me unwrap this, okay? This is why I think Toronto Blue Jays have to sign Shohei. It's not, maybe it's $500 million we tried. It's like, no, you do anything you do to sign him because, first of all, let's back up and unwrap this. Rogers in general, the owners of the Toronto Blue Jays, they're a $25 billion company. So they're in media. And to me, if they're trying to get, their $25 billion to $50 billion company, it's like you have it right in front of you because what Shohei brings, yes, it's a hefty investment in terms of, $500 million isn't chump change, but think of the media deals you create. Right? The ability to create in-house media, because it's not like they even outsource that media to a Japanese media. They could control everything in-house and recoup that money. I'll even take it a step further. So if it's $500 million, I would say budget $550 million and sign Ha-Sung Kim from the Padres. Like get him on the Jays, because I'm telling you, I got I got nothing but love for baseball players, but the platoon of Biggio and Whit Merrifield, I mean, this would be a massive upgrade. On top of that, you're piggybacking on 2 markets, the Korean market and Japanese market, with media, to recoup this investment back, right? So, and then within the next 2 years, you'd invest in the catching position because Shohei's not going to pitch for another year, right? So you're basically, you got to get rid of Kirk. You got to sign someone like a William Contreras on the Brewers, right? And someone who could really be a top tier catcher and lead kind of like that pitching staff. So for me, that's why Toronto needs to sign him, is that marketplace of the media capability and the international and global market as a Toronto Blue Jays brand would be invaluable for the Blue Jays as a global brand, right? So for me, if I'm the owner or CEO or making the decisions, that's what I'm doing. So that's why I say the Jays. The Dodgers, I don't know their capabilities, but it's going to be, I mean, that makes sense. Dodgers make sense, but from a business perspective, I don't know if it makes sense. They're just gonna, make money however they do, and I'm sure they can with media and stuff like that. But I'm talking about in-house control, and then, Toronto being a very diverse city, this is a great marketplace to market. You got Kikuchi there, you got Ohtani, and then you got Ha-Seong Kim. To me, Toronto would be a destiny of, seeing baseball at its finest, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly hoping the same as you, obviously, but like if I'm just really just thinking about the hobby, I would say it really has no effect. Like Shohei is kind of transcended above like home teams. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to stop collecting or wanting to collect Shohei if he goes to the Dodgers and vice versa.
Right.
For collectors, obviously.
Well, right? I do think there might be a lot of Toronto collectors because it's like, depending on how big of a player and impactful of a player he becomes, mm-hmm. I think the demand of his cards in general, even in a Toronto Blue Jays uniform, right? So it's like, even an auto in a Toronto Blue Jays uniform, I think it's going to be highly sought after, right? Whereas an auto or a card in a Dodgers uniform, it might not be as special. Maybe I'm biased. Maybe I have a little Toronto bias in me. But the way I see it is I kind of see the demand for these cards in a different uniform, though, like with Ohtani.
Right. You know what? You're right. You know why? Because, I could see if he goes to the Dodgers, maybe some collectors buy some Ohtani cards autoed in a Dodgers uniform. But if he comes to the Jays, guess what? I'm buying five different cards. Okay?
Me too. I'm buying. That's my auto.
I'm buying a jersey with Ohtani on the back. I've never done that ever for any Blue Jays player. Yeah. This year will be my first where I get a name. Yeah, and I'm with you. I will contribute my fair part to Ohtani apparel.
Let's make it happen, Rogers.
You can add that to the pitch. All right. Okay, so the next guy, obviously, plan B was Juan Soto coming to the Jays, but obviously we heard just yesterday it looks like he signed with the Yankees or got traded to the Yankees along with Trent Grisham. What do you think that impact's going to be, Juan Soto going to the Yankees?
I don't think Juan Soto necessarily. I think he has a big role to play there, so a lot of eyes are on him, and I think he's going to do great. I don't doubt his ability and his skill set. What I'm interested in is how it impacts Aaron Judge. It really gives him a lot more protection. And for me, it's that Yankee lineup is looking better and better. They have holes in it still, but that would be a massive, massive upgrade in terms of even protecting Judge, especially that lefty-righty combo in the middle of the order, right? So I would be interested in seeing Judge's production with someone like Soto, whose on-base percentage always leads the league, so it could affect Judge more so than Soto, because I think you're going to get your 280, your 30 home runs, your 100 RBIs, your 130 walks, hitting 280. So, and then his OPS is, 900 to 1,000. That's what I expect every year of Soto. So I think you're going to get that. The off years, you're going to get something like, where he outperforms and hits 353 or whatever he did on that 1 year to win the batting title. But I don't think I've seen Soto be his best, but I think his card values were so peaked that they're continually correcting themselves. And maybe they are at a point where it's too low for basically his talent and his stature. But I think there might be bigger opportunity in a player like Judge. Basically, like if Judge is able to really benefit from this.
Yeah, no, I haven't really thought about that, but I like that take. It might be a good time to see. I haven't checked Judge prices lately, but if it's dipped because it's the off season, if he stays healthy,
injury and off season, I think it dipped. Yeah,
then it might be a good play. I like that. I'm gonna check after this show to see if I want to pick up Judge again. And for me with Soto, I think it's of course, being a Jays fan in the AL East, you hate to see it, but as a hobby collector, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't playing in the Yankee Stadium for lefties like it's a huge benefit because of
massive short porch, right?
Short porch, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm like 40 plus home runs. That's not out of the
yeah. I mean, if he does that for sure, his hobby impact is definitely relevant, right? And that's why it's like, if he does that and he can easily do that, then it could affect him in a positive way. But if he does his regular 280, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, really good season like he always does, right, and starts off super slow, remember? So it's like that's going to impact his card prices, and then, you know, the emotions are dropped, and then he finishes off strong, right? That's why if Soto had hot springs in each of his years, his prices would be way higher.
Yes.
Because his prices tanked every spring, and then they climb up, and then they tank again for the off season. So it's the wrong tanking. You want to peak at the spring training, so then you sell at the spring training part. So,
but I mean, if you know that's what's going to happen, buy in April and May, and then sell in October when it
that
starts
could be
to
a play
again.
too.
Yeah. All right, a couple more. I don't know anything about this player. You probably know more. Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He's already linked to the Yankees as well. What do you think about him as a Japanese player potentially coming over?
You know what? I'm loving it more and more that we're seeing a lot more Japanese players, to be honest, is because now you're truly getting the best baseball league in the world, right? Like they're sending their players, and I guarantee you, because their philosophies have to have changed, because in the past, you know, there are takes where, you know, people don't leave Japan or people don't leave Taiwan or Korea because it's doing more, not necessarily harm, but like it's leaving the impact on future generation kids that the best place to play is not in our home country, it's somewhere else, right? And I think that philosophy has changed a lot for Japan. You know, being able to play in different you know, leagues and parts of the world. So this is no different. I mean, this guy is the real deal. Like like I said, we've seen the talent, you know, year after year. We've watched the World Baseball Classic. There's other, you know, arms that aren't even here yet. And yeah, I think it's going to be massive for whatever team signs Yamamoto, because he's an elite type number one starter, right? So that's what you're going to get. So, and he's fairly young as well. And there's guys like Roki Sasaki too. I don't know his status, but like there's a lot of Japanese arms, and it's always exciting to now, you know, see them compete at the major league level.
Yeah, no, I think there's still definitely a play there, because I don't think the casual baseball fan knows about these like import players from different countries yet. You know, it's not to that level where like, oh, even for myself, like I'm a huge baseball fan, but my knowledge of Yamamoto is pretty limited until they come over and they start to perform, right?
Yeah,
like, So
like
that's
nasty, super small guy, but like nasty. Okay. So it's that's the issue too. A lot of people are gonna be like, will his body sustain, you know, that type of wear and tear?
Well, if he's nasty, I hope he doesn't sign with the Yankees. We don't need more competition in our division.
Yeah, for real.
All right, last one. Comeback player of the year this past season, Cody Bellinger. You know, I was high on him, and then he kept on tanking with the Dodgers, and then I was off on him. And of course, when I'm off on him, he wins comeback player of the year with the Cubs. So I don't know what I'm doing with Cody Bellinger. What are you doing with him?
I mean, Bellinger, we talked about Bellinger earlier on the podcast and why I was off on him. And I'm glad, one, he's figured it out. He needed something like this where this was a make or break of his career this season. So it kind of saved him. He's a 27-year-old, 28-year-old in 2024. So for me, in terms of a hobby perspective, he's not doing enough in his career to, I think, justify me investing in him right now. Of course, he can, you know, have an unbelievable season and potentially win an MVP if he puts up, you know, 2019 numbers where he won that MVP. And just to put it into context, he hit 305 with 47 bombs and 115 RBIs as a 22-year-old. So fast forward now, he's a 27-year-old guy. So for me, I'm I'm kind of off those players where, and we talked about this previously, is those lull periods of no matter how good they do. And Mookie Betts was in one of the longest ones. Nolan Arenado, Manny Machado. You could keep going on. It's like there's no love for these veteran players who've been in the league. Everybody is chasing young rookies or potential Hall of Fame on the tail end of their career, right? So for me, Bellinger, I like him as a player. I think he's super talented, but in terms of investing in him, I'm personally staying off. I wasn't a big Bellinger investment type of guy, but if the price is right, I mean, there's plays everywhere, right? So
I just checked, speaking of prices, I just checked his base first Bowman Chrome Auto, BGS 9.5, is just over $200.
Wow.
So it's come down a lot since, obviously his rookie of the year season. And, the latest news is that he might go to Seattle. I don't think that'll help with his prices.
No.
I think the upside is pretty limited. Although, him being comeback of the year, good for him.
Yeah.
All right. That wraps up our new segment called Hobby Impact. And, any more signings. And, hopefully, fingers crossed, next time we record, Shohei's a Blue Jay. We'll just devote a whole episode on that. Sorry, guys. Sorry for the rest of our listeners. Or maybe we'll just do a Friday episode on Shohei. But yeah, we'll definitely be keeping an eye out. All right, let's finish this episode with our regular weekly segment we call Pick One. And this is when we both choose two cards or two players, and then we debate which one we would rather invest in. So, Hyung, do you want to start things off?
Sure. We'll stick with the hot topic people, both Shohei and Soto. So let's just say we're investing now, even though there's a lot of attention on them. And probably, prices have gone up on at least Soto. I know it has, him being a Yankee. I think he was kind of low on certain areas, but if you had to invest in two cards, I'm going to put two PSA 10 cards up against each other. And first is the Topps 2018 Shohei Ohtani, the pitching, the 700 gold out of 2018. For PSA 10 sold for $2,000. Okay. Would you invest in that, or would you invest in the 2018 Topps Update Juan Soto gold out of 2018 PSA 10? It last sold for $1,250. After that's coming off a $900 sale, so it increased. I guess it would be like 30 or more, 40%, almost 30 to 40% over the span of a week or a couple weeks because of this Yankee news. So, are you buying Soto for $1,250, or are you buying him at Ohtani at $2K at this point?
It's funny because I saw that $1,250 sale and I'm like, should I use that as a pick one? But I didn't. So I was aware of that sale. Man, $2K is a lot for a Topps Update Gold. And I love Shohei.
It's not the Topps Update. It's
sorry.
The Topps 700, like the
right.
The white jersey, not the red jersey. So there is a price difference, I believe. I think the more sought after card would be the Topps. The regular Topps, not the Topps Update. The Update's the one with the red jersey.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm just seeing it now. So the regular one is the white jersey. Okay,
white jersey, yes, where he's standing up tall.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. That's a nice card too. I like it.
Yeah, it's a sapphire image.
Still 2000. I'm gonna go with Juan Soto.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna go in on Shohei, this is me just personally, I would double my budget and get a better card.
I like that.
That's what I'm thinking. And Shohei, you're paying a little bit of premium because I have seen recent new listings for Soto just because of the signing, and they're all overpriced. I'm not buying any, but $900 to $1,250. I'll take the risk and get it at that price and hope like we just talked about in our previous segment, Soto has a crazy year with the Yankees playing with Judge.
No, I like that. I think I'm on the same line of thinking there, where if it were $1,250, then I think I think easily Ohtani. Easy. But I think the opportunity with Soto, I've seen that card go up to over $3K. I think $3,500 maybe at its peak. We're talking about Soto's gold. And we mentioned it before, Soto doesn't have a lot of cards.
Yeah.
Right? So his paper parallels are very sought after because he doesn't have a lot of chrome update cards in general. That's why the refractors go for as much as they do, and the chrome bases decently sell well overall, more than paper. So, I think in this combination, because Shohei has so many different variations and different rookie cards, I think the option is Soto at $12.50.
All right. Soto sweep. Okay. All right. My pick one to end off the show. I'm going to go the opposite. The news has kind of died down because of the whole free agency and everything else. So I want to see what you're going to pick with, prices having dropped or dipped a little bit since these guys were named Rookie of the Year. Okay, so obviously I'm talking about Corbin Carroll in the National League, and I'm talking about Gunnar Henderson in the American League. I'm using their PSA 10 first Bowman Chrome Autos for both their respective cards. The Gunnar Henderson, and they both sold this past week, a few days ago, so it's pretty recent comps. The Gunnar Henderson 29 Bowman Draft Chrome first prospect autos, PSA 10, sold for just over $517. All right. And the Corbin Carroll 2019 as well, Bowman Draft, first Bowman Chrome Auto, sold for $857.
$857.
And, a week before that, I guess during the announcement, it sold for $1,100. So it's come down since.
So that was
short peak.
Corbin Carroll's, and then Gunnar's.
Corbin Carroll. Corbin Carroll's $857 and Gunnar's $517. And if you want to know their stats, I checked them out too. Obviously, Corbin Carroll, we know with the speed, 25 homers, 54 stolen bases. His WAR was 5.4. And Gunnar Henderson, 28 homers, 10 stolen bases, but obviously in the heart of the lineup, 100 runs, 82 RBIs. His WAR was actually 6.2.
Wow. Let me just look at something. I like both of them. As a player, I think I do like Corbin Carroll better in what he brings, but I think based on the pricing alone, I think Gunnar Henderson is the buy over Corbin Carroll, just because his buy-in's a little cheaper. So if it was apples to apples, then maybe I would pick Corbin Carroll. But even then, it's two different players. Do I expect Corbin Carroll to be a 25 to 30 home run guy every year? He could be, but that's to be determined. Can I see Gunnar Henderson as a 30-plus home run guy? Absolutely. Right? So, but then if Gunnar Henderson can get that average up to a 270 to 290 clip or become relevant in the MVP race, because he ain't going to win an MVP hitting 250. So it's that's what you kind of hope for in these types of players. MVP type caliber, that's enormous amounts of hype around them. So Jackson Holliday's the next guy. So that would that impact, prices on Gunnar Henderson, or would that complement it? Those are things that, and then you look at Arizona, is the Arizona lull gonna ever, be surpassed, or are we gonna always see Arizona get no love? So yeah, at this point, at that price, I think I'm going Gunnar.
Yeah, okay. Man, I kept on going back and forth. I actually like Corbin Carroll better as a player. I think he can maintain the 20 to 30 home run pace. I kind of had my concerns with him going into his rookie season, but then he proved me wrong. I also think the era of speed players is going to make a comeback, like the Ricky Henderson days, like the league really pushing speed as well. And, 50, 60, 70 stolen bases will be a thing where people will start to keep track of. And that obviously plays more in favor for a player like Corbin Carroll. And of course, it's high batting average, 285, is helpful. So I like that, but I think for the same reasons we talked about Soto and Shohei, we love both players, but it's the price point that gets me, right? So for $500, Gunnar Henderson, I still really like him as a player as well. I think that's just a better deal, and I'm going to take Gunnar in that case as well. All right, another great show. A lot of baseball talk. I know our fans of the podcast love it, and hopefully if you're more into other sports, you appreciated this episode as well. We do talk about other things as well. With the Super Bowl coming up in a couple months, we'll definitely dive into that. My fantasy football team, on a side note, I'm killing it, second place, 10-3. So yeah, I'll definitely bring it up on the podcast in the near future. Okay, thanks again for all those who tune in. We appreciate you guys. We'll have a brand new episode for you on Friday. See you then. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.